So you're opening it to people who register online, correct? Okay, we're good. All right. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for taking the time to attend this event. This is really good. I hope it's going to be really of interest to you and everybody who's interested in the safety of the planet. I think it's interested in sustainability, and therefore, it's interested on agriculture, sustenance, food security, all those good things. And what our good friend Richard here is going to talk about in a moment simply touches upon much of this, and he'll explain how and why. My name is Paolo von Schirach. I am the president of the Global Policy Institute. Some of you have been to other events, so we're here to support in many ways Bay Atlantic University, but also to offer our programs to the wider community. There will be people joining us today online via Zoom, and I welcome those of you who are not here physically, but are with us online. Very welcome, warm welcome to all of you. I'm also a professor of political science and international relations at BAU. I see many of my students here. Thank you for being here. And here we have in this room, I guess, a mix of students from political science from Mentora College with the faculty of Mentora. There's a chair of political science, my good friend Sean, who graciously is joining us today. And so I just wanted to say that I'm really thankful to Richard. A couple of words. Richard is a veteran in this field. He's been working in international development for well over, 20 years. I don't know exactly. It's a long time anyway. He lived in many different places, including a long stint in Kyrgyzstan, we discovered. And he has the unusual skill of speaking the language, which I think it's an interesting accomplishment just by itself. Well, you speak Turkish, so you guys are beating me. I get along with Italian. How's that? Which is not exotic. So here we go. So Richard has a pretty storied career in international development. He has worked in many, many countries on many different projects, but he's a kind of specialty, and this is what he's going to talk about today, is cold chains. Now, if I say just cold chains like that, it sounds banal and somewhat unattractive. So what is that? How can that be important? Well, it turns out, and he'll explain it to us, that it is extremely important. And I'm not going to go any further on that because that's his subject. So Richard, welcome. It's all yours. Thank you,
Paolo. Thank you very much. Thank you all who are in the room. Thank you who are online. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. We have a very global audience, and I can say that I've had the pleasure of visiting many of the countries that you are from. I do have a couple of countries. Mongolia would be a great country for me to get to. Argentina, unfortunately, I haven't got to, as well as Tunisia. I would love to get to Tunisia. But I have been to Brazil. I have been to South Africa, Kyrgyzstan, been to France as well. So we don't want to leave out Europe. We do need an Australian, as we've determined to make sure that we hit all the continents, because I have been to all the continents in my travels. And what has happened throughout my career of 20, 25, dare I say, almost 30 years of conducting humanitarian aid projects throughout the world is that it has gradually shifted towards not just business in general, but really focused on the cold chain, which we describe as the movement of perishable products. And that could be food, which of course is a big one, but also, as we've known, it's been very important in the pharmaceutical industry and making sure that vaccines and antimalarials and things like that are actually kept in a safe manner so that they're able to provide the assistance to people who need the medicine when they need it. What I'm going to do is basically give you a short presentation just to set the tone for what it is that we're going to talk about, the benefits of the cold chain, and then how it can be implemented potentially in your countries. What's the status in your countries? Because since I've been to many of the countries, I can give you an idea of where you're at and where you need to be. So without further ado, like I said, we're not in the slideshow thing. I don't know why it's. Yeah. So, like I said, I'll give you an overview of what's happening now. We'll talk about where people need to be, and then maybe what we'll even do is talk a bit about where we should be in the distant future to make sure that we're making the positive impacts that we need to make on the environment and for people in general. Thank you so much. We have Brendan in the background who is helping us make sure that we're there. As I said, quickly, we're just going to cover this current situation, where we're going and where we should end up. The current situation, so this is a typical cold supply chain. Very busy, very active. Basically, what you have is in the food situation, you have on-farm to the left, you have the distributions in the center, and then the retail outlets as you get it off. All the things that are circled in red is all the transportation that has to incur. So if you think about when you go to the store and you pick up your banana, or you pick up your apple, or whatever meal that you have, all this has happened before you have even gotten this product into your hands. And it could be that product is coming as far away as New Jersey in the United States, or as far away as Chile or China or many other countries around the world. So there's a lot of products that are moving around and have a lot of miles under them till they get to us here in the United States, or potentially in your home country. I focus on transportation because transportation happens to be, in most cases, the weakest link in the cold chain with regards to maintaining temperature control. Okay. When you look around, you'll see a lot of trucks here in the United States that have refrigerated units, and it's keeping things cold when it goes from one link to another. There are countries where that expensive investment has not been made. And so what happens is product is moved from the farm into the supply chain, and then it has not consistently been kept in the cold chain. Now, if it's an apple, does it really make that big of a difference? You know, some might argue yes, some might argue no. But if it's pharmaceuticals, does it make a big difference? Yeah, it does. So
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes, well, if you really like your fresh tomato to be perfect, then yes, it makes a big difference. But when we talk about the impact on people's lives, it has a huge impact on the farmer side, but we'll also talk about how it has a huge impact on people's lives because we talk about the waste, especially in the food system. Okay, and when we look at the food system, I always like to look at the United States first. It's my home country. Kyrgyzstan is my adopted country, but there's a big difference between the United States and Kyrgyzstan in where waste occurs. Okay, so what we're talking about here is that you can see, you know, on farm there's 16% of waste that occurs of the total amount. Okay, but then you look all the way over to the consumer side, it's 43%. 43% of all waste in the United States happens at the consumer level. What does that mean? That means somebody's banana turned from yellow to brown, and they don't want to eat a brown banana, so they throw it away. Okay? Somebody bought some lettuce. If you go to Costco and you buy 10 pounds or 10 kilos of lettuce because you want to get a good deal, you're only able to eat a little bit, and then all of a sudden it starts to spoil because it doesn't last that long. Well, there you go. The waste happens at the consumer end. The 2% is manufacturing and processing. Sorry. So to the left is the barn where it's on farm. The next one, the 1 million or the 2%, is at the processing level. Basically, in the United States, if it can get off the farm, it gets processed. There's very little waste, very efficient, and maximizing the use of that. 40% that is the retail store. So the retail store gets the product in, they want to sell it to you, and that's where a lot of waste occurs. I'm sure that you guys are all Americanized now, so that when you go to the apple bin, you're only picking out the best apple, and you want this size apple, and you want that size apple. And
sorry, does that include the restaurant industry?
yes, yep, so that would be all retail at that point. So the thing is that the 43%, when we look at this, and like I said, if we take Kyrgyzstan or we take other countries, where do you think the waste occurs along this line? Where do you think the most of the waste occurs? Near the consumers? It's actually the reverse. It's actually the reverse. Because the cold chain is not starting on farm, you have most of your losses, 40 to 50%, on farm or in transit to the manufacturer. Okay, especially when you think of high value, highly perishable products such as strawberries or blueberries. It is almost as if you need to harvest that product and put it into cold right away to extend the shelf life, right? When you extend the shelf life, that means it has longer time at the retail outlet, and when you buy it, it has a longer time to last 3 to 4 days in your refrigerator, okay? But what we see is in developing and emerging markets, because the cold chain has not been developed, the waste happens at the right on farm. Now, what happens when it gets to the market? People in developing and emerging markets, they're not going to buy something and then just throw it away. My experience has been in developing emerging markets, when a banana turns brown, you eat it, you cook it, you do something with it. You don't just throw it away, because literally you're just throwing away money. I've been to Pakistan, where I saw a man walking around with a clear plastic bag of apples. And what had happened was the retailer had taken the apples that had bruises and dents, cut out the bruises and dents, put the cut up apple into a bag, and then sold that, so as to avoid throwing away product that we here in the United States will throw away just because it's an operational cost, right? And so what happens is that product then goes into landfills, right? It actually creates methane gas that is actually impacting the global climate because of that waste. We see that here in the United States, but we also see that in developing and emerging markets, where product is just spoiling, literally just spoiling. So
you can't have it in full screen for some reason, so you just got to do it like in this view.
okay,
Just continue. So
okay.
everything else is fine.
So what are our near-term solutions? There are a lot. As you can see from this busy slide, there's 9, 10, there's 12 different things that can happen, from mobile processing units to liquid air, hermetic storage bags. There's a lot of things that can be done, but all of that costs money, right? And that's really the issue, is if things are going to be corrected, can the country that is doing the correction, can they afford to implement those solutions? And then can the consumer in those countries afford to buy it? Again, I've been in many countries where product goes from the market, goes from the farm into the market. No cold chain, no sanitation, it just goes doom, doom, right? But yet when that country goes to export, right, that product is handled with a kid glove. It goes into cold chain. It is nicely treated. It is so perfectly done to go out and go to Europe and go to other places around the world. My question has always been to the people who are handling the product inside, why do you handle product with more care and concern for other people around the world and not for your own country people, not for your neighbors, not for your family? Right? Hey, it's okay. It's okay. We'll just send it to, they'll buy it, they'll eat it. Lower quality, potential for sickness and things like that. But yet, when it's for export, please take it. This is perfect. We must have it be perfect. And it intrigues me when it's like, well, it comes down to money. Our fellow countrymen, they just can't pay because when you implement cold chain, it potentially can cost up to 30% more, right, to implement a proper cold chain. Another aspect of the cold chain that we have issues with is understanding the labels. Here in the United States, and I would love to know about France as well, as we look at the European system, and I know Brazil has a good system in place, but there are dates on all your products that you get, right? What do those dates mean, right? Expiration date, right? Expiration date. So if you have an expiration date of November 15th, right? Does that mean the yogurt that you bought on the 14th is perfectly safe? And then on the 15th, no, don't eat it. It's not good for you. Does that mean that? No, no, it doesn't. If it was a month later, okay, maybe, right? But a day later, no. So the dates are very confusing here in the United States, right? As to what is best by, used by, manufactured on, and things like that. Lots of times people ask that in the United States, we have apples that are huge, right? Have you noticed that? The apples are just huge, but they don't taste. Is anybody listening to this? They don't taste as good as product from Kyrgyzstan, as good as product from Brazil, and things like that. Because best practices in the cold chain is you harvest the product earlier, and thus it is firmer and more stable and can be transported. Versus going into some other countries, when you harvest that right from the tree and you bite into it and the juices flow down your arm. It's a beautiful thing, but it does not transport very well at all. And as you saw in the picture, the transportation, it's off the truck, on the truck, off the truck, on the truck, off the truck, on the truck. So it's not going to last as long as other products. The other thing is we can talk about how to use what this company calls imperfect foods, ugly food, right? So it doesn't look good. It might have something sticking out to the right. It might not be the right color. It might not be the right shape. It's still food. It is still edible, but it's not perfect as they show in the movies, or it's not perfect as they show in the magazines, or now the Instagram perfect shot that you want to get. So the idea of just buying everything, right? And using that product. This I find is a really interesting slide because this talks about what percentage of household spending goes to food, right? So take a look at, if you can find your region of the world and see if you can see basically how much is spent. So look, we got Tanzania, 62%, right? Ecuador, Brazil is 20%. If you look at the United States of America, 6.7%, right? 7%. France, we even have France up there at 14%, right? So you can see the reason why the United States is guilty of wasting a lot is because it doesn't cost a lot. It financially does not impact people like it impacts people in other places around the world, right? So that's another consideration as to why it is that you want to make the investment into cold chain, because if you make the investment into cold chain, more food becomes available, better quality food becomes available, and people are eating better quality, more reasonably priced food. Okay.
Why the United States? Is it because of the cold chain in the United States? Is that why food is cheaper here?
Yeah, the abundance of food that we're able to produce in the United States, we're very efficient at it, right? Very efficient at it. It's basically become almost robotic. And some of the solutions that I will show to you, like this solution, for example, this Zest Labs, they can track the temperature from the time that the product has been harvested. They can track it all the way to the retail shelf. And what can happen is you see the shelf life of 12 days. When they know that they can ship it from California to New York City, and they're going to have plenty of shelf life. If for whatever reason there's an issue with the shelf life, you can use shelf life of 9 days. They say, okay, we're not going to ship it across the country because that's not going to last as long. Let's redirect this to Dallas, Texas, right? And so it shortens the transport time so that they can actually have longer shelf life, which means it lasts longer in the refrigerator of the consumer there. right? And that's how you reduce the spoilage. But that's a technology, and that costs money, right? So again, expiry, best buy date, right? Now what they're doing is they're putting actual thermometers on the product, right? And you can track to see what has happened with that product while you're when you're buying it. So you can say, oh, maybe this doesn't have as much shelf. I'm going to eat it tonight. If I'm going to eat tonight, I'll buy it and share it. Oh, I'm going to eat it in 5 days. Oh, maybe I won't buy this one. I'll buy another one type thing. Again, the best buy thing is really a challenge as we look into, trying to improve the cold chain. But I always want to look at what our long-term solutions are, right? Our long-term solution is going to be big data. It's going to be studying what happens where, why it happens, when the temperature. Is anybody feeling hot? Is anybody feeling hot in the room? Okay. So I'm feeling hot. We have some people. That's what happens to fruit and vegetables when they're not in a temperature controlled environment. They start to feel hot and they're sweating and they lose their weight, right? And they actually degrade faster in a warmer environment. So that's why when we use big data, we figure out what is that pain point, right? In this room, maybe the maximum capacity we should have to maintain the proper temperature should be 15. But because Paolo is so popular, we have maximum capacity, right? We have maximum capacity, and that's how we're raising the temperature of the room. The other thing we need to see is growers need to have a contract. Right now, the growers are trying to grow as much as possible, right? I'm just going to grow as much as possible. I want to sell as much as possible, right? But if there was a contract that said you need to grow 10 tons, we're going to buy 10 tons, then that will make it easier for them to plan their sales, okay? So just so you know, in the United States, there is a lot of contract farming, but there's not nearly enough. Not nearly enough contract farming, okay? Because the farmer is always trying to make more money. So there's a big company out there that buys a lot of product between this one company. The name starts with W and ends with Walmart. So if you can figure that out. So Walmart and Kroger, these two companies control 60% of the retail outlets, the grocery stores and things like that. They control that, 60%, two companies. They determine a lot of different things. They drive the prices down, the farmer gets less money, so the farmer's trying to make up that and get more profit by growing much more, okay? But when you grow much more, you waste much more, okay? So, for example, we did some research that showed that potato farmers, very efficient. Potato farmers in Idaho, right? They only have a 2% waste on farm, 2% waste on farm, right? It's amazing, right? 2%. The issue is in Idaho alone, one state in the United States of America, they grow like 50 billion pounds of potatoes. That's a lot. So when you take 2% of 50 billion, let me do the math, it's huge amounts. It's huge. It's in the 40, 50, 60 million pounds of potato. That's huge when you think of, oh, it's only 2%. Then, yeah, but it's still a lot when you calculate it out. Last thing I'm going to say about where we might want to be. This is a snapshot of a cartoon that I used to watch when I was a kid. Now, when I was a kid, it was in the last century, but as you can see, they have a list there of which food do you want. You push the button and out it comes, right? So my feeling is, and this is like way, way, way out there, it's going to be like this, like the Matrix, right? Where all you're going to do is eat a mixture of amino acids and nutrients and things like that, and we won't even farm at all. And you'll push that button and it will create the recipe that you want and it will come out. And that is going to be like the extreme solution to the inefficiencies that we have with farms, with food, and with waste. And with that, I thank you for your attention. I hope that I've been able to raise some questions for you in your minds, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Well, first of all, thank you, Richard, for this overview. I hope it was enlightening to me, certainly it is. And again, I'm not a specialist in this field, not even close, but I saw with my own eyes, having spent a lot of time in Africa and other places over 20 years, many of the things that you say. And, just to keep picking up on something you just said right now, so that it can be clarified for everybody. There is a huge disconnect. In other words, the production chain of agricultural products, take Zambia, just to mention one country, is such that they say contract production doesn't exist, really. I've seen with my own eyes, on the road from Kitwe to Lusaka, mountains of watermelons, something like, which by the way doesn't spoil immediately, but over time it does. And I said, why not go these mountains of watermelons? Well, because the farmers get subsidies to produce and they have no clue where to sell it to. I said, but Lusaka is 20 kilometers away. There's a shop right there, which for those of you who don't know, is a branch of a large South African supermarket, chain. Can anybody arrange a truck to make 20 kilometers and bring the watermelons to the shop right? Well, apparently not. And so the watermelons stood there and people were selling it to drivers coming through the road who would buy 1, 2, maybe 3, but not 50, And I said, all this stuff is going to be wasted. And that was not, this is just one detail. I don't know if you can comment on this in terms of the disconnect. Of course, the cold chain is what would hopefully, if properly implemented, and as you indicated, costs. Maybe you can elaborate, one, on the lack of an existing sort of a seamless chain from the farmer to the supermarket shelf, or say a country like India, where you have diffuse, small shopkeepers, and that adds to, you can explain that a little bit. So 2 things, the actual cost of in particular countries of implementing the cold chain solution, because the technology, as you pointed out, exists. It's not like it's a mystery, but it's a matter of cost. And then how to reduce all these inefficiencies in terms of connecting the producer to the wholesaler, to the retailer.
So it's a good point. You give the country example of Zambia, but that happens in many countries around the world. Many countries around the world. The farmers just take their product to the side of the road, and if you pick it up, you get a really good price because it's literally right off the tree or right out of the field. The challenge, as you mentioned, is why can't they organize a truck? Well, the truck is an expense, right? And then when you organize that truck is coming out empty, right? So the efficiencies is that truck that's expensive is going empty half the way. So now that means that the person who is shipping the product needs to pay for the truck to come out and needs to pay for the truck to go back. That farmer on the side of the road, why is the farmer selling on the side of the road? Well, he's trying to make some money. He doesn't have the money to organize the truck, right? So then what happens is ShopRite, a great chain, like you mentioned, says, well, I'll come out and get your product, but you have to sell it to me at this price because I'm bringing the truck out. And all of a sudden the farmer's like, well, wait a minute, I'll take my chances with the drivers that are coming by and try to keep that money rather than pay you that lower price, right? Which goes back to contracts. If ShopRite had gone out and said, hey, all you farmers, I need 100 tons of watermelons and I need it, you could have actually arranged that, but that takes communication. How are you going to pay? How do you organize this? It really then becomes a logistics issue.
And financial transactions, obviously payments, deadlines and all that stuff, right? Which is very difficult to organize.
So basically it's beneficial to customer environment, and how does the producer win? Like, maybe he's doing contract, conversation and stuff, he also maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's taking longer time, right? So how it's gonna be good for
Yeah. So the seller, again, going back to big data, right? Because typically, I'm sure that all of you have friends or family that have some sort of farm or have some sort of agricultural activity. How do they make their decision? What I have seen in many markets is, oh, you know what? Last year, the price for carrots was huge. I'm going to plant carrots this year, right? So what happens is everybody plants carrots and then the price for carrots goes down. But you know what? The price of cabbage, the price for cabbage went through the roof. So next year, I'm gonna plant cabbage. Why did I plant carrots last year? And so without the information, that small farmer is like just looking around and wondering, what should I do? Instead of being part of a larger organization, so look, we're not competitors, we're collaborators. We're gonna sell to ShopRite, we're gonna sell to Walmart, we're gonna sell to Carrefour, right? We're gonna organize it and we're gonna deliver it, and so that everybody wins, right? That would be ideal. But the problem is, Paolo. Do I trust Paolo? Okay, I trust Paolo. Right. But or something happens and Paolo upsets me. So I'm not going to work with Paolo. I'm not going to work with him. I'm going to plant what I want. So it takes a long, long time. And I've been researching because I have another project that I have to do in the Republic of Georgia. And there is a cherry organization, an organization of cherry growers that started in 1908. In 1908, over 100 years ago, they started together and said, look, we got to work together. If we don't work together, we're not going to be able to grow and supply and do this. It's already over 150 years ago.
But
Is it
they're
150
gonna
years?
be monopolies, right? If they work together, like competitors.
So it could seem like that, but it's not a company. It's called the Cherry Marketing Institute, right? And they're just focused on, hey, we just want to take your product and we want to help you get it to market, right? We want to help you find buyers, right? So for example, Brazil is huge in the proteins, huge in getting meat into the market, right? But yet when I go there and I see how they're moving product internally, it's once again that question of, why is it you're handling this meat that is so wonderful and so delicious and so good for export, but yet when you handle product inside of your country, you don't have to use a refrigerated truck. It's okay. Because they don't want to pay the money, because that is an expensive part of that. So it takes collaboration, each link in the cold chain, but it starts with the farmer having the knowledge and the data, the information to be able to grow what is demanded by the consumer, the customer.
So based on that, would you say that this whole process, is it in the best interest of the customer or the production side? Because it also goes to the fact where they are putting expiring dates and something like that. Would you say they are focused more on benefiting the production? They don't care whether when it gets to South Africa or whenever it will still be fresh, or is it everything is done in the best interest of the consumer?
That's a very good question. Who's it's done in the best interest of, right? Let me tell you right now, it's done in the best interest of whoever has the power, right? So whoever has the power at times, right, pushes things through. For example, many of the expiration dates are actually set in the benefit of the retailer, right? Because, oh, if I think it's bad, I got to go out and buy some more, right? If you think about it in those. So for example, in the United States, if you have a product that's expired, you can still donate it to a food bank, and the food bank can then give it out to people who are in need, right? So why is there an expiration date if somebody else can eat it who just happens to be a bit poorer than other people? I don't know, right? But then, all right, we can give an example of Argentina. For example, Argentina had a fresh meat market for the longest time. And in many countries, when you go to the fresh meat market, the meat is right there. It's just dangling. It was killed in the morning. It's really fresh. Oh my gosh, it's so fresh. It's so delicious. The problem is that as each hour passes by, the potential for bacteria and food safety issues to grow was huge. I mean, it's really unsafe to buy meat later in the day. I give Argentina as the example, but I've seen it in many countries around the world. The fact is that there was a food-borne illness outbreak in Argentina, and I can't remember what year it was. I want to say in the 50s or 60s, and like 200 people died. And it came back to the fact that they were chopping the meat on wooden butcher blocks, not using proper food safety techniques of temperature control and things like that. And so Argentina overnight said, that's it. No more open air meat, no more open air butchers. It all has to be processed.
By the way, I hope you understand it. he mentioned wood, because wood absorbs bacteria.
Yes.
Right?
We
You
actually
cannot
had
wash
a-
it off. Even if you wash it off, the bacteria
The bacteria
stays.
stays.
And so it's very unsafe.
We actually had a breakout of this, I think, I don't know the proper name.
Yep.
It's a crazy cow disease.
Yeah,
That's what we
mad cow,
call it in
yeah,
Spanish.
yep.
During the 2001 economical crisis.
Oh, wow.
Because there were people who were raising cattle that had to kill it and sell it because they didn't have a ton of choice. And then we had another breakout.
Yep.
But yeah, no, definitely Argentina is one. My parents are Bolivian born and raised, and we saw that happening in markets that remain until my parents, adult life.
Yep.
Because there was no other choice. Like
Yep.
people needed to eat meat in the to get the nutrients that they, like everybody needs in their diet. And there's not a system in place for them to properly or safely handle the meat. So they just.
So I give Argentina as an example. If you go back to the early 1900s in the United States with the, which jungle was that? Upton Sinclair, right? Wrote a book about the meat industry and how, yep, and all that stuff that was going on. So it's not that we're saying Argentina,
No,
right? It's the United States. China, for example, China in 2003 had an outbreak of SARS, right? The avian influenza. Why? Because they were still processing live poultry in the market. Since then, China has now outlawed that, and now poultry has to be processed in a safe food environment. Okay, that's where you can see the power that we were talking about going to the consumer, because it's consumer protection. Sadly, it's almost like people have to die, or there has to be some sort of major thing happen that creates that power shift where it goes from the wealthy to the consumer, to the person who is eating. In the United States, we have the same thing there was a spinach, E. coli. I'm sure you've heard of the number of E. coli outbreaks that happen in the United States, and it seems to happen on a regular basis. So in spinach, the farmer is so pushed to try to plant more and more and more. The farm had gone, and instead of planting here on flat, it had kind of started planting up on the hill, right? And so it actually expanded by planting up on the hill. Well, what had happened was there was a dairy farm right next door. The cattle was coming over, sticking their heads through the fence and eating the spinach. But also, as what cows do, they would defecate, they would go poo on the ground. The rainwater came in and washed the E. coli from the cow field into the spinach field, and that created an outbreak of E. coli in spinach. 5 years later, after that outbreak, the spinach industry had only recovered to 60% of sales of what had happened prior to the event. I remember something happened in Germany with an outbreak, and Germany said, oh, it came from Spain, and Spain said it didn't come from us, it came from somebody. So it gets to be a really serious situation when something like that happens, because if, for example, Kyrgyzstan is shipping some really delicious apricots, and all of a sudden it gets to be that, oh my gosh, we got sick because we ate Kyrgyz apricots. I mean, that can devastate an industry for sure.
I want to ask you, you mentioned that the contracts with the farms and all these other measures that can be taken in the planting, not even the production of a product. These necessarily involve more governmental regulation, because these companies are not going to do it by themselves. They haven't done it so far, and they're the thing that moves them forward is profit. In countries like mine, it's been shown again and again that they will handle with the most care product that's going to the European markets, the American market. How realistic it is to consider that in America, a country that's so passionately capitalist, that they will put more hands-on management of contracts between farmers and producers. It's all the solutions that you propose involve more direct contact from government to put the consumer's needs first.
So it's a really a good point about what role the government plays in trying to help make change and act almost as a referee, right? The government should be there to say, you need to do this and you're not doing that. But then you all have been here long enough so that you know that most Americans are like, government, stay away. We don't want the government involved, right?
It's invisible hand, so it's regulated without government.
Yeah. So the idea is that it's an interesting question you ask because it seems like the government would be a logical choice. I was involved in a project in the Ukraine, and we were talking about, you need to use best practices. The industry needs to use best practices. It's all been done. It's not new. I'm not talking about new things here. It's stuff that's been done for over 100 years. And they're like, no, we must have the government. And I said, why are you asking the government to come in and enforce rules that you know that they're going to come in and say, oh, you didn't do that right, pay me some money, right? They said, we're not strong enough together ourselves to self-police, to self-govern. We need the government to come in and say, no, you must do it this way, right? You must do it this way. The reality is it takes a long time to mature to the fact that we trust each other, right? I'm going to trust that when Paulo said he's going to deliver me 10 tons of tomatoes, that he's going to deliver me 10 tons of tomatoes at the price we've agreed upon.
At the appointed date.
At the appointed, all by the contract. Too many times, and I'm sure that you've heard of this as well, too many times there's been the price of tomatoes in the fresh market goes to the roof. Paulo goes to the fresh market, makes all his money, and then he comes to me and he says, hey, well, sorry, I sold them in the fresh market. Here's your money because I know that you helped me out and stuff like that. And so I make my money when I resell that product, either in the form of pizza or the form of just selling it on. That's when I need the product. I don't need money to cover my costs. I need my profit. So when you have that trust, yeah, Paulo's going to deliver. He's not going to take it to the market. That's number one. Number two, when you have a system in place where contracts can actually be enforced, right? That's very important because I don't know if you know this, but Paulo, he's got a relative or a friend on the Supreme Court. So when I go to enforce my contract, Paulo makes a couple of phone calls and my contract goes away, right? So you need.
So watch out, guys. I'm really, really powerful.
So you definitely need the environment that encourages that trust level. Number one, trust between people, right? And then if it doesn't work out, the environment that says, if I go to court, it's going to be a fair trial. Not that exists 100% in the United States. There are still issues with that. But overall, if you enter into a contract in the United States, you will be able to get due process, right? So, I mean, that's where in the United States, or as an American, I might say, less government, let's try to work together and solve it ourselves. Because then what happens is the government can intrude upon even more, right? Because now they see that you're selling 10 tons of tomatoes. Well, where's that money? You didn't record that money, so now I'm going to come in, I'm going to investigate. Yeah, it's again goes back to trust. Do I actually trust the government to enforce it fairly?
I wanted to go back to another question about cost. And here we have South Africa, Namalanga here. So which is within the African context, as you know, it's much more developed than other countries. So maybe you can comment to say, first of all, if you have any sort of glance, say how is the situation in South Africa? Just to mention one country that is a bit ahead of others, and also about the cost of implementation, whether it's in South Africa or in other countries that have less money. And you said correctly, I guess, that all this is not a mystery. It's not like we need to invent something new, but it's a matter of cost. What is the challenge? Say, for instance, is South Africa reasonably well developed in this? What additional investments will be necessary to make it up to snuff in terms of best practices? And what would be the situation, say, in Zimbabwe, which is next door, but it's a disaster country? And how are they doing? They're also quite dependent on agriculture. How do you view that? And can you make some comments on both of the state of development in South Africa or other countries and the costs necessary to get up to snuff in having workable culture?
So in my previous organization, I helped start our office in South Africa. I helped in Brazil to merge with an association in Brazil. So I have a lot of experience in those areas. When you talk about South Africa, you have to understand that South Africa has huge exports in citrus, right? Coming out of Cape Town and Durban, right? Huge amounts. So they need the infrastructure in place to be able to ship product out of the country, which then makes sure that that infrastructure is in place to receive product coming into the country. We see in South Africa that there are pockets of disposable income that affords you to have a fully operating, fully functioning supply chain. ShopRites and things like that, where it's the organized retail sector. You go into the store and you're buying what you want. You see more in the rural areas where it still is the traditional farmers market where you're going and going out and buying things just because it's local. One of the rules of thumb that we use in general is there a refrigerator? Is there a refrigerator in the home of the consumer? Because if there's a refrigerator in the home of the consumer, then that means the consumer is actually completing the cold chain, right? If not, then the consumer is literally going and buying for that day or the next day, right? And you mentioned India previously, and I wanted to share this with you because I went to a colleague of mine home because we had an office in India, and he said, "Oh, do you want some ice cream?" I said, "Sure, I'd like to have some ice cream." I said, "Okay." So he turns to his house help and he says, "Go get some ice cream." I said, "What, you don't have ice cream? Don't worry, you don't have to buy that." He said, No. We don't have a freezer. Anytime we want ice cream, it's cheaper for us to send the guy down the street to buy the ice cream and we consume the ice cream so that we don't have a freezer because we don't want to buy the freezer, you da. So again, it's something as simple as a refrigerator, a freezer inside the refrigerator. If you've been to American homes, you see how huge the freezers are. I mean, the refrigerators are, right? Tall, big, like massive, right? Think about your country context. How large are your refrigerators? How large are your refrigerators? Say it again. Same. See, so France, great. You guys are eating as much excess as we are, right? Because do you really need that bigger refrigerator, right? Not really. But it does mean the convenience. It does mean that you can go to Costco and get things cheaper. As we showed, food in the United States is really cheap. Yes.
About this, we saw with your map, and I was quite surprised because I think I've never paid like that amount of money going to the grocery store. Like I pay like maybe twice more than what I would spend in France to get almost the same thing for a week. So that was,
Yeah, I'm not going to dispute it, but I can't say why. Are you buying fruits and vegetables? What does your basket look like?
vegetables, meats, pasta, rice, like basic things. And my basket is quite the same back in France and here. And so I was just surprised.
Okay. So I will say that I took that photo 5 years ago. So it could be outdated. And as you know, inflation, prices of food are going up. So in my humble estimation, right, prices in the United States are going up to where they should be, not that food is getting more expensive. You know what I'm saying? I would like to see that money transferred to the farmer. I would like to see that money transferred to the truck driver. I would like to see that money transferred to other people so that, we're not just a low-cost center. I'll just finish on the fact that in the United States, of course, we have Walmart, we have Target and things like that. But the two major food chains that are coming to the United States are Lidl and Aldi. Does anybody know Lidl and Aldi? Okay. In the scope of things, do you think Lidl and Aldi are closer to Walmart or closer to Whole Foods? Walmart. So again, what retailers are making inroads in the United States is low-cost food. And so what happens is when you have a low-cost competitor competing against a low-cost competitor, the price of food is going to go even lower. You don't see anybody trying to compete with the Whole Foods, right? Whole Foods is up there on its pinnacle, and like you pay a lot of money, it's good quality food. In my opinion, the cold chain at Whole Foods is excellent. They take such good care of product. We buy raspberries at Whole Foods and we buy raspberries at Giant. Whole Foods will last 3 days longer than at Giant. Giant seems to go, if you don't eat those raspberries the same day or the next day, and my wife kills me because I buy the whole, when I have a chance, I might buy it at Giant just driving by, and it spoils so quick. It's Driscoll, it's the same company. So the difference is, in my opinion, as a specialist, is the difference in the handling of the product by the retailer.
So what if, since we don't have a lot of time left, Richard, I'll go back to the money. In other words, the cost of implementation. If you are, which I think is really the main problem, how countries that have not the credit resources are not there, the investors, how do they can get this done, or incrementally, or what? How do you it can profitably invest in cold chains, not as a philanthropic activity, but as a business where you in an under-resourced country and make money?
And can I put an addendum to that? That was my question. What is the cost differential between a regular supply chain and a cold chain?
So in general, the cost differential is 30% because you're adding on the refrigerator, right? The refrigerators also add weight to the truck, right? So you now can take less product as opposed to just an empty unrefrigerated truck. The idea, this is where the government can be involved. The challenge with the cold chain, it's very capital intensive. You have to buy the truck. You have to invest in the actual facility to do that. The government could come in and make ease taxes on importation of equipment to help develop the cold chain. It could help if they structured systems and payments so that the farmer was not having to pay before they got their harvest. Lots of times farmers have issues because they plant, which is capital intensive, then they wait, and then they get their product. But they get their product at the same time everybody else gets their product. So prices are really low, and they have to rush to sell their product in order to make money to pay back the loans. So the idea is to structure the lending in a means that will be more favorable to the business model that doesn't allow them to pay in the cash flow when cash flow is tight. What's really impressive about Africa and other places in the world is the ability to pay with mobile payments. So quite literally, there are places in the world where a farmer will not get paid for 30 days, will not get paid for 60 days. But with the M-Pesa and other means to pay with mobile payments, they should be able to get paid upon the receipt of the good, right? That says, oh, I've inspected it, it's good quality, boom, hit the button, and it goes out. If we could speed up that process, right, that would help the farmers. That would just keep the money flowing. But again, the power is in the retailer's hands. Does the retailer want to pay that fast? No, because the retailer gets to use their money, gets to use their equipment, their inventory for 30 to 60 days.
Incidentally, I guess you probably remember because we talked about in the context of Kenya. We talked about M-Pesa, this is what he's referring to, which is a mobile phone-based payment system, which is developed in Kenya and has been extremely successful, whereby millions of people, unbanked people who don't have a bank account, don't have anything, can make and receive money on their mobile phone, even if it's not internet enabled, because it's based on text messages. And that's been developed years ago, and millions of people are using it. It's not yet everywhere. I'm not sure about South Africa if it has an equivalent system. I don't know. But certainly Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, other places have. So that facilitates things.
So the idea is, again, big data. Big data could be as big as the farmer is able to say, I have 10 kilos of tomatoes, right? And all the farmers plug in that they have 10 kilos of tomato. ShopRite sees it. ShopRite can then, I call it the Uberization of the supply chain, where they could organize a truck because they know exactly where all the tomatoes are, and they could go around and pick it up.
That's what I'm trying to say, because we need transparent handling, because I don't want it to buy apples and see 3-4 days if it's gonna deteriorate in specific days, right? I need just very easy specific.
Right, and that Zest Labs, if you look at, not only can they put that, they can take the temperature of it.